The first step is to drain the coolant. Remove the coolant cap from the expansion tank, remove the splash shield from underneath the car, and then loosen the drain plug with a Phillips head screwdriver. The drain plug is located at the bottom driver's side, as shown here. The next step is to remove the fan with a clutch fan wrench set if you have an automatic transmission. The goal here is to take the tool with the hole cutouts and slip it over 2 bolts to keep the housing from spinning, and then use the wrench to twist that nut shown right there, from the passenger side to the driver's side. As you can see, I've put down a little cloth to blunt the impact because sometimes it helps to use a rubber mallet to hit the wrench. In this case, it's already been loosened and I'm just loosening it a little more. Once the fan has been loosened, remove the fan and the housing together. Disconnect all the wiring connections from the fan housing. There are 2 on the passenger side, and then there are 2 pop tabs on either side of the housing. Pull straight up. This is the second electrical connection, also on the passenger side. It simply just pulls apart with a little pull tab. And then lastly, this is the removal of the fan and the housing together. One last screw, and then they both pull up kind of in tandem. They occasionally get stuck. We just got to give it a little wiggle, and then they both come up. Step 4 is to remove the belts. Each E46 seems to have a different way to relieve the tension on the belts and allow for removal. Mine uses a T25 that twists toward the passenger side to relieve tension on the main belt, as you can see here in this video. The next step is very simple. Remove the 4 10mm bolts from the water pump pulley. Next, remove the 4 10mm bolts from the water pump itself. When removing the water pump, expect some coolant water mixture to spill out, so maybe have a bucket or something underneath. Additionally, my water pump was in there pretty tight, so I did have to give it a knock or two with a rubber mallet. This is the water pump that I replaced. As you can see, it's very free spinning. It doesn't really catch and move the water coolant mixture through. And this is the new water pump once it's in. As you can see, there's a lot more tension, a lot more resistance. It's definitely going to move the water and the coolant through. The next step is to install the new water pump. 4 10mm bolts for the water pump itself, and 4 10mm bolts for the water pump pulley. This is also a very good time to replace other coolant components such as the thermostat, which I'm replacing here, the upper and lower radiator hoses, and even the expansion tank because the coolant's already drained. If anyone's interested in seeing the replacement of the thermostat and some other components, just let me know in the comments. After replacing the water pump and any other desired components, the next step is to reinstall the belts. Do the main larger belt first, then the auxiliary belt. A picture is shown in just a couple seconds of the belt path in case you need a reference point. This picture is just a reference for how the main belt should be routed. Reinstall the fan and the fan housing. I actually got a new fan, but that's a different project for a different day. The last step is to fill and then bleed the coolant system. To do so, put the key in position 1, put the thermostat to the highest temperature, put the fan to the highest power. Remove the bleed screw from the upper radiator hose right next to the coolant expansion tank, and fill it up with a mixture of 1-to-1 BMW coolant and distilled water. Ensure your bleed screw is off and pour a coolant water mixture until it overflows. As you can see, when it overflows, there are some bubbles that come out. What you're doing is essentially purging the air out of the system. You do this repeatedly until you don't see any more bubbles. The ultimate goal is to have it right to the edge, the lip, if you will, of the bleed screw, and then have your thermostat on high, fan on high, and have no more bubbles come out. This is just a closer view of the bleed valve. Again, you want to fill it all the way up and then ensure that you have the temperature on high and the fan on high and make sure that no more bubbles are coming out of that valve. Once they're not, you cap the valve and then put the expansion tank cap back on also, and you should be good to go. The last step is to test your work. Turn the car on, let it idle, ensure that there are no coolant leaks underneath the car, and ensure the car temperature slowly ramps up and does not go past the halfway point on the gauge, which is about 200 Fahrenheit. If you are seeing wide temperature swings or the car begins to overheat, more than likely you have air in your coolant system. Rebleed and try again.